Welcome to the EntrePastors podcast on YouTube. This is a show that helps pastors think, act, and thrive as prosperous entrepreneurs.
Well, hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us on the EntrePastor podcast. We have two really special guests today. We want to introduce you to Brian and Victoria Menninger. Folks, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Thanks,
well, I'm here with my co-host and partner in crime, Jon Sanders. Jon, great to see you, my man.
Yeah, likewise. And looking forward to the conversation. You guys have a really interesting story, and I can't wait to unpack that with our audience today.
It is, and it's really unique in so many ways. So we, primarily our listeners and the people that are in our tribe have some sort of ministry background, and they're people of faith, they're followers of Christ, and they specifically have a sense of calling, not only necessarily in the church as an church employee world, but also just in what they're doing, and usually it has a kingdom purpose. Many times it's serving people and serving them, as we do our stuff, we do it as unto the Lord. And your story, Victoria and Brian, is so unique because you have been church planters and you've been involved in a real unique way in making that transition out of church ministry world and into the marketplace. So would you just take us back to the early days of that, maybe when y'all were a little bit younger couple and in church planting world, and then what that began to look like as you made the transition out? Would you just share your story with folks, and also please let everybody know what it is that you do, your business, I mean.
All right, Victoria, why don't you kick this off?
I was going to throw it to you. Oh, gracious. So we, first of all, we've been married for 25 years, but most of those years have been probably in some kind of ministry or another, whether it was youth ministry at first or whatever. We also have 4 daughters we are now empty nesters. Our last one just went to college and stuff. And so, but we were a ministry family. And then I guess, Brian, you'll have to jump in here and fill in some details, but you were a senior pastor of a church plant. We were pastoral couple for about 6 years in a church plant, and then left that church plant, and Brian resigned from there, and we moved back home and from where we were at, and then we moved into building another business again. So that's a really short version. But what we do now is we have a residential construction company that we build outdoor structures for clients and such. So patios, pergolas, that sort of thing, helping people kind of get reconnected to the outdoors and their space and their families. But for us, more importantly, the business is not just about what we build, but more importantly, we build really cool stuff, but we really strive to build our people and our community and those around us. And for us, we really do see our work as kingdom work, as work that we're doing, trying to do unto the Lord. So that's a really quick snapshot. Brian, I don't know if you want to jump in and anything I missed there.
Yeah, I think, for me, it's been a journey of trying to kind of understand some of the uniqueness of how I've been created with, not only a calling and passion for ministry, but also for entrepreneurship in the workplace. And, some of the journey that Victoria described was, I don't know if those were trials or those were, trial runs, or if those were learning experiences, or even just, younger as we kind of find our way of trying to figure out, what that looked like. So for example, when we were church planting, I was a bivocational pastor. At the time, I thought that was the solution. For me, that was not a good solution because I don't do anything halfway. So that just ended up being two really full-time gigs. But today there's a lot of peace in the place we've kind of found ourselves in, and that God has led us, is a place of a lot of fulfillment, feel like a lot of impact, and so forth. So that we enjoy.
Well, those are a couple of really great topics I'd like to dig into a little bit more. And Jon, you feel free to jump in there whenever you'd like. So here's the question I want to ask because or get you to speak into, because I know a lot of our folks, this is where they are. It's one thing to have some time and sort of build an off ramp and be bitten by that entrepreneurial bug early on, and then transition out of a vocational ministry or as a church employee. But it's another thing to just kind of be shoved off the cliff, and you've got to fly. You're the eaglet. You've been pushed out of the nest, and it's fly or die. So hearing a little bit of your story, it sounds as if it was a little bit of fly or die.
Yeah, I mean, at some level, maybe, yeah. So so I resigned from the pastorate and also resigned from my job. Mm-hmm. So at the same time, pretty much. And so that's probably part of what made it fly or die for us. But both pieces were just, there was enough understanding that this wasn't quite the right fit and we were to go a different direction. They were kind of independent decisions, but they happened to coincide. And so there was kind of a stretch, at least for me, where I just kind of freelanced for a while with the skills that I had. We had a previous construction company before the Great Recession back when we were in youth ministry. And so I kind of freelanced for a while, and then God kind of opened the door for me to take a position with a company that ultimately kind of started the steps that led to us launching this one. So, but yeah, so it was a little bit of both, I guess, from that standpoint. When we started church planting, I was actually running the first construction company that we had started, and thought that was going to be my bivocational gig, then which would have given me a little more flexibility for the church plant. Then the Great Recession happened and that company closed. And so then I ended up, having to kind of make ends meet with a full-time job. So,
I was talking to a pastor yesterday who is needing to transition out of where he is. He's 56. And we're hearing this story more and more. Like it's happening all the time. And we just talked to a fraction, of the people. So one of the things it seems is that people struggle with is they want to make sure that when they make that transition, they get it right. And if I could people can't see us, so if I were using air quotes, I would use them right there. I think there's a lot at stake. People don't think that they can afford to sort of figure it out as they go. But having known you all for a couple of years, I know that you've pivoted some, and that your marketplace life now looks different than it did back then. So would you just talk to that person who is maybe anxious or uncertain because they think that they've got to nail it right out of the box, or else they'll just stay stuck where they are, having a sense that they really shouldn't be there?
Victoria, you got some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think and I understand that feeling in that sense. You want to get it right. You don't want to step out of something you've known and into something maybe you don't know, for a lot of different reasons. But I think in our experience, what I've finally come to realize and learn is very rarely do you know if you're going to get it right. You can go with a sense, you can go with, kind of, some counsel, that sort of thing. But sometimes getting it right is simply taking the next step into where you feel like is the right direction. And so, what we have today, what we're doing today in the marketplace and in construction, we could not have seen it 6 years ago when we were kind of getting started and going, and even before that, when we were stepping out of ministry, because our step out of ministry centers around not only Brian's story, but my own story. I was coming out of a season of severe depression when we left the ministry. And so that's my own story there as well. And so a lot of my direction was clouded by just a lot of stuff I was carrying from those ministry days and that sort of thing. And so it was hard to know, is this the right thing? But one of the things that I think that I know for myself that whenever I'm trying to make a decision into the next thing, spending time obviously in prayer and doing those kind of things, but asking the Lord, what is just the next step? What is the right next thing to do? And then just doing that and trusting that the next one will open up. And that's a hard place to be. That's not easy. I will never say it's easy. It doesn't feel practical because we want to have it all figured out. But sometimes the things that we think we're going to get figured out or the direction we think is going to go ends up changing anyway. And so if we go with the mindset of, okay, in this season, this is what I'm going to do, I just find that there's a lot more peace for me when I approach it that way than trying to figure the next 5 years out, because that's really hard to do.
And that's a lot of wisdom in that.
Yeah. And if I can jump in on something there, you may not get it right. And I hate to break it to you, but that's the entrepreneurial journey. And it doesn't really matter whether you get it right or not. Now, I hate to, that sounds a little crass, but, God is bigger than our mistakes, and his purposes are greater than our mistakes. And trust me, I'm standing with a guy that's made a lot of them. And I've seen God work in spite of them. And I've seen God use them to teach me things and help me along that journey. And so I think a lot of times, yes, we plan, scripture says, man makes his plans, but God orders his steps. There's two pieces there. God's ordering our steps, but we also plan. But we've got to hold it with open hands and understand that the only security is Jesus. The security ain't that salary from a church or anywhere else. The security isn't in entrepreneurship. Right. There's no security in this life outside of Jesus. And so if we're trying to make sure that we've got it all figured out till we get it right, or we have a foolproof plan, that's just a recipe to have it blown up in your face anyway. So, we need to plan, we need to think, we need to use the wisdom that God gave us, but also understand that we may not get it right, but that doesn't mean that we weren't supposed to go anyway.
Hey, if you're at a place where you can write down a couple of takeaways, I wouldn't wait until the podcast is over to do it. I would stop and write 2 down right now. One is that God is bigger than your mistakes. And then, you don't have to have it all figured out. You're on a journey, and the real joy of our life in Christ is not in reaching the destination. The joy is in the journey and what happens along the way. So that's so well said, Brian. I appreciate you weighing in on that. Normally when we have these conversations, we mentioned to you all just before we hit record that we do like to provide some backstage content for people that want to go a little bit deeper. And normally during our conversations, something emerges that would make some good backstage fodder. And what I'd like to do, Victoria, is if it's all right with you, just for somebody that's looking for something like this, I would like you to tell a little bit about your journey and some of what you went through. And I want you to talk about, before we end this part of the podcast, I want you to mention your book and how people can get a hold of it, because I know that you've told your story in that form, and it's very, very good. And I know that we have some people that would benefit by knowing your story. And we can talk about this more a little later in that backstage part if it fits anybody and what they want to listen to. The reason I'm saying that is because I know some of the emotions, especially the emotions of our for those pastors that are listening, for your wife. They deal with some matters that you and I don't deal with, and vice versa. But there's a part of that journey that it takes someone who's been through it to really speak into it. So if it's okay with you, Victoria, a little later on, we'll get into some of that part of it. Okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I've got a question that kind of goes right along with that. And when I heard your story earlier this fall, Brian and Victoria, I got the sense that when you transitioned into more of an entrepreneurial ministry, and I do want to, in a minute, talk about some of the real ministry, the people impact that you're having through your business. But I get the sense that even though seems to be in a really good place today, when you made that transition out of pastoral ministry, it came at a real low moment. Like you already mentioned your depression story, Victoria, but I want to just talk to you a little bit about the mindset, because I got the sense, and maybe you can fill in some of the details, but just I got the picture of a couple that, and sadly, it's a common story in pastoral ministry. It's that pastoral couple that is just, chewed up and spit out. They are just overworked, underpaid, and they're over it. They have nothing left in the tank. And I get the sense that you guys were in that place, both from a ministry standpoint and financial standpoint. So I'd love to hear kind of your mindset of transitioning away from, quote unquote ministry into just a job, like what you had to go through in your own thinking to overcome some of those voices that might be saying, well, man, you're leaving ministry to go do something in the marketplace. Or was that a struggle for you?
For me, it was just like you described. It was, God, I can't do this anymore. That was, it was, you've given me, and I remember kind of my prayer during that time in terms as it related to my work, because that's, that's what we're talking about here with ministry or the marketplace. It's our work. Is God, I have a passion for ministry. I have a passion for business, and I can't do two things. And somehow you got to bring this together for me, and I had no idea what that looked like. I didn't know if I was going to end up in I applied with parachurch organizations and all kinds of things because I just had no idea what that could look like. I knew it wasn't what I was doing. And I also knew that with where, what Victoria mentioned, the place that she was at, the bulk of my energy needed to go into caring for her. And so just had to trust that God was going to help us get through, financially one way or the other. And so, that was really where I was at. And this company was not on the radar at all at that point in time. I thought my entrepreneurial days were dead and behind me, honestly. So, so that's kind of where I was at. I think Victoria, you can probably get into yours a little bit more.
Yeah, I think definitely when we left ministry, we needed to leave ministry. We were not in a healthy place anymore. I was not in a healthy place anymore. But I remember I grew up in the church, and so I had only known one way of ministry, right? And so there was a lot of guilt for leaving the church and the work and all of that. But I just knew that if I didn't, that I may not be here next year, type of thing. And I just knew that it was taking a toll on our family. And so I know for myself, when I first left ministry, there was a lot of anger and there was a lot of frustration at the Lord, at church, at people, just in general. And I had to work through a lot of that kind of thing. But a lot of it was just, we just needed some time to heal and gather our family we have, like I said, 4 daughters, but it was rough. We were at the bottom. We, when we left ministry, we moved from where we were at back home, what we call home. And we were functionally homeless for a while. We lived with parents and with family because we couldn't afford to stay in a place of our own. And so there was a lot of just hard work in front of us to get back up on our feet to do that. And there was a wrestling that had to happen. There was a wrestling that had to happen with the Lord and with myself. And Brian and I had to wrestle through a lot of things. But then we had to make a decision what we were going to do next. Were we going to sit in our anger and our bitterness and all of those things? Or were we going to work at healing and then saying, okay, God, what is the next step? And his next steps were kind of surprising. It's probably not, like Brian said, it was not on our radar to go back into entrepreneurial stuff because we've been entrepreneurial ever since we've been married. We're both kind of wired that way. And so that wasn't an unusual path for us, but it wasn't a path we were thinking we would take. It's just the doors that started opening.
That's awesome. One of the things that I heard just loud and clear when you guys were sharing your story earlier this fall was how much impact you're having in the lives of people through your business. And again, this is just something that we reiterate often through this podcast, is that ministry can look like a lot more than just standing behind a pulpit inside the 4 walls of a church. And, when you guys started telling stories, Victoria, especially when you were sharing stories about just some of the real life people that you're impacting in and through your business. I mean, it's like those are church stories, man. I mean, those are successful gospel stories, and it's real ministry. So you don't have to share every last one, but do you mind just sharing a few of your favorites that come to mind, just some ways that through your marketplace ministry, you've had an impact in the lives of people?
Yeah, sure. So just a little bit of background. So like we said, we run a construction company, and it started out as just myself and then Brian, and we're up to 45 staff now.
Wow.
And one of our hearts so we become a much larger community of workers together. And when we started, what I remember thinking is, like, if I ever run a company where I have, employing people, I want them to know that they are cared for. We want to take care of our people well, because Brian and I have both worked for folks that have taken care of us well, that have taken care of our family. And we also wanted to just be the hands and feet of Christ and care for people well. And so part of what we do here is we kind of try to take a training model when it comes to construction and what we're doing, and inviting people in that maybe want to learn the trade of construction, or maybe they're folks that are, coming out of a rough space. Maybe they're coming out of prison, or maybe they've just hit bottom and they just need a place to start over, or whatever. Providing an environment that is work that they can enjoy, but be life transforming as well, but also work that helps them to get back up on their feet. And so we have some folks that maybe they came to us because they were starting at the bottom again. Maybe they came out of prison and they just need a place to get started. And so we've have some folks that have been with us for a couple of years. They've just slowly been getting back up on their feet, and that's great. Brian, any other stories that kind of come to mind specifically that you can think of?
Yeah, I think, part of what comes to mind too is just, ministry is, just sharing the love of Jesus with people and helping them draw closer to him, and serving and loving them well. And in the workplace, one of the things that happens is that we're together a good chunk of the week. And so life happens. People lose loved ones, family members get sick, people get sick themselves. Relationships change, breakups happen. There's all kinds of things that happen in life. And so just being together and being faithfully present gives us the opportunity to be there and be a support and care and serve when those things happen. And so we've had all kinds of crises that have gone on through this place. And I don't know that I really feel like I can talk about those specifically here.
Sure, that's fine.
Sometimes it's just as simple as something happens and you say, okay, can I pray for you? And let's do it right now. And we have done that many, many times through the years in many different situations.
Yeah, or there's even times where, a team member, something happened with their housing situation or whatever, and they just need help finding resources and to get back up on their feet in that way. And so just to be available to help them do those kind of things. What I find is that when we work really hard to help people, when we help to meet their felt needs, the things that really matter in that moment, whether it's housing or food or just care of their families, they have much more receptive to conversation. When we try to have just a conversation about Christ or anything like that without having invested in them in real ways and really taking care of them well, those ears stay closed. And it's not why we do that necessarily. We do that because we love people and we want to care for them well. And when we do that, they're just much more receptive to just, like Brian said, stopping by the office and saying, hey, I'm having a rough day. Can you pray for me? Because they know that about us. They know that we will do that for them. They know that we care at the heart of who we are. And so we do try to do those kind of things for our people.
Good. I love it.
Don't you find that sometimes in church world, when all you see is someone one day or maybe a day and a half or 2 days a week, people can put on a mask and do a lot of pretending even if they don't mean anything malicious by it. But when you're with someone every day, you see the good, the bad, and the ugly. It's hard to wear that mask all the time. So I definitely, for anyone who would say, man, we want to see all of the warts, the good, the bad, and the ugly, I would say, well, spend time with them at work when there's stress and deadlines to meet and people getting sick or not showing up. And I know that's a lot of what you all do.
Well, and they see all that about us too.
That's right.
And so
That's
there
right.
are certainly those that, for whatever reason, background, maybe have had a bad experience, they want to see authentic faith, and sometimes it takes time, and so that's one of the opportunities that we have in the marketplace is it is an opportunity where folks can see us live our faith day in and day out, perfectly or imperfectly. I've done both, but if we're willing to be honest and with people, both when we struggle and when we succeed, then there's a lot of opportunity there.
Well, as a follower of Christ, I know that it's important how you do your work, but as we've said, you're also in the people business. Okay, so we're all in the people business, really. One of the things that I love about your story, and Jon referred to this, is some of the life transformation that you've seen, and I know that's intentional. So what I'd like to see, if you would, we've got some people that have service-based businesses. So we have about 3 different paths that we help walk people through, even in our membership. And one of those is a service-based business. It's either a construction company or landscaping or pressure washing or painting or whatever. And I love, though, what you all have done over time in developing people and developing leaders. And the short version from my perspective, what I've heard you all share, is that there was a lot of turnover. There were a lot of people that were kind of starting to fall into the patterns, maybe old patterns, and there wasn't really a good success path for them, I think, early on, where they would hit a ceiling and then that'd be about it, according to their skills. But I love what y'all have done in intentionally helping mentor and apprentice and train people so they can actually have some advancement in life. Would you talk some about that?
Yeah, so kind of like what you described. I mean, when you first start a business, start working with people, it is just figuring out how do you help people really grow and really develop in their skills, and yet get your work done and the revenue coming in, like it all runs together, type of thing. And so we were having some challenges, and so one of the things that we did was we started working with a good friend, Jeff McManus, on building out a training program for our company. Now, we've had to kind of tweak that and figure out how that works for us and such. But that's what's been nice about it, is that it's allowed us to then begin to think forward about how do we really train people and how do we help them. Like when they come into a position, this is the floor of that position. And then every position has a ceiling. It just does. And so how do they then get to the next level of, the next place of growth for themselves? And so we're trying to work to map that out. We definitely don't have it down. It's not perfect yet. But we have started developing also. Brian and his team on the construction side just developed an apprentice program, in particular for people that they want to get into the trades, but they don't know much of anything and they want to just try construction out. And so we can bring them into a training program that allows our guys that have more skill to be able to train them in the field while they're working, to see if they want to, continue on in the field of construction and really become a craftsman or woman. We have women in the field as well. And so opening that door of opportunity for them, because a lot of our trade schools are either they're closing down, they're going out of the high schools or whatever, but we still have a real need for people to know how to build. And I know that's a passion of Brian's as a builder himself. So he works real hands-on more on that side of things. For me, it's just finding what are ways to help people really grow in our environment, not only just professionally though, but personally too. So one of the things that we say around here is that until you start growing personally, you're really going to struggle to grow professionally. And so how do we help people grow personally? What does that even look like? So we're working to develop some programs around that. We had started doing some what we call discovery days, where we take them off site and we just have them spend time thinking about what their goals are, what are the things that they're shooting for, and how to really start discerning that. And a lot of these folks have never had that kind of teaching done. They've never been taught about leadership or how to maybe work at their own goals going forward. So we are working at trying to put those things in place. Again, we don't have it perfect. We're still, sometimes I scratch my head and go, okay, have we gotten very far with this at all? And just helping people to do that.
Mm. I can see or imagine couples who have served together at a local church in some capacity, even if one was actually the staff member or the employee and one was sort of the unofficial partner. We complement one another most of the time. But I can understand somebody being anxious in transitioning out of local church ministry world where they can almost step into a ready-made network and role and use their giftedness. When you go back into the marketplace, that's not always the case. But in your case, you all have found a way to build a system there where you complement one another. And so I would just ask Victoria, Brian, a pretty good employee?
Yeah, most days. He's tolerable. No, I'm kidding. No, I could not do this without him. Actually, he really is that driving force behind this company, because he's a builder. I mean, he's a builder at heart, not just a builder of things. He's an amazing craftsman himself, but a builder of people and stuff. And so we have learned over the years how to complement one another. We haven't killed each other yet, so.
Good deal, man. All right. Well, Jon, I think it's probably a good time to go ahead and make the transition and head backstage for those interested to dive a little bit deeper into this story. And then I do want to talk, though, about Victoria, if somebody's going through the emotional part of that, especially, and would like to check out your book and some resources that would be helpful to them, how would you advise them to do that? We'll put in our show notes as well.
Sure. Well, the book is called Daring to Fight When Grit, Grace, and Faith Take Depression Head On. And it really is just my story that I went through, but also practical steps on how to move out of that dark season, out of that place. And that can just be found on Amazon. Any major bookseller will have it as well, or you can find it on my website, victoriamenninger.com.
Well, thank you both for joining us. We're just so thankful for you all. Jon, anything else?
No, this was real good, and we'll join you guys backstage here in just a minute. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing with our audience. We're grateful for you.
Thanks for having us.
Welcome. Thanks, guys.
Well, hey, thanks for watching this episode of the EntrePastors podcast. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can be notified every time we release a new episode. If you'd like to get connected to other pastors who are learning to think, act, and thrive as prosperous entrepreneurs, then we invite you to check us out on Facebook. Just search for the EntrePastors Connect group, answer a few of our simple questions there, and we'd love to include you in the conversations. And if you're really ready to go to the next level, then we invite you to join our EntrePastors membership community. When you become a monthly subscriber, you will receive access to courses, exclusive community, and coaching that will help you along in your own EntrePastors journey. If there's anything else we can do to serve you, please visit us at EntrePastors.com, and we will do our best to serve you there. God bless everybody. See you soon.